Well, hello and welcome to Wellness by Design today. I'm Jane Hogan, the Wellness Engineer, and today we are going to be talking about what your mother didn't talk about with the pelvic floor. I've got my guest here, Jana Danielson, fellow Canadian, and also a pelvic floor expert. So we're going to talk a little bit more about issues that maybe you don't even talk to your best friend about. So I'm excited about that. Jana, welcome.
Jane, thanks for having me here.
I'm delighted because we need to talk pelvic floor. I'm going to tell everyone a little bit more about you first. Jana Danielson is an award-winning wellness entrepreneur who, through her own experience with physical pain, turned her mess into her message, which has now become her mission. She is an Amazon International best-selling author, founder of Lead Pilates and Lead Integrated Health Therapies, and the Meta District, her online wellness community. Jana is the host of the Medicine of Mindset Summit and a member of the Holistic Leadership Council. She is also the creator of the Cooch Ball, the world's first patented pelvic floor fitness tool for women. Jana has coached and consulted with tens of thousands of women from all over the world to help improve their quality of life, their confidence, their impact in this world. Well, Jana, I love what you do. I love your message in the world. You know, it's not everyone that wants to talk about pelvic floor. What makes you so passionate about talking about the pelvic floor?
So, Jane, I found Pilates to get out of my own physical pain. 20 years ago, when doctors told me that the pain was in my head, I was seeking attention. I was on 11 different medications, and so movement for me, excuse me, really became my medicine to healing. And through that experience of reconnecting with my body, my breath, alignment, all those things, I discovered this part of our body, this group of muscles called the pelvic floor, which we'll have a little anatomy lesson in a minute just to help women really understand what is this pelvic floor, where is it located, why should I care. But what I found is that no one was talking about this part of our body, and if they did talk about it, they would whisper or like do a little point like down there, I've got an issue down there. And it's like this enigma, like what is it, why do we think that when we become moms or when we go into menopause that it's just a part of being a woman, that we're going to start to have issues with the pelvic floor? So let's not talk about it, let's believe we're the only one going through it. And that's why I really stepped up into this space and I was like, no, this is a group of muscles. So just like we talk about our glutes, we want a good butt or a strong butt, we want strong arms. The pelvic floor is a group of muscles. So functionally,
Hmm.
they hold up our organs, our pelvic organs, our bladder, our uterus, right? They hold our organs inside of us. And we live on a planet with gravity. And that's a really important job, right? Because
Yeah.
things are going to start to descend.
Right.
Right, so that's the first thing, is it's got function. It also has sensation. There's also feeling that happens in and around that area. And what a lot of women don't understand is that the pelvic floor is actually the floor of our core. All right, so let's dissect that a little bit. So a lot of people think that when if they need to increase their core strength, they just got to get on the mat, pound out some abdominal crunches, some sit-ups, and they're strengthening their core. But that is just like one little sliver of the puzzle. If you think of an apple, when you eat an apple, what's left? The core. That apple has a stem, the roof of the apple. It has that little fuzzy part at the bottom, which is the
Hmm.
floor. And then it has the cylindrical core that you just ate. Our body is the same way. We've got four abdominal muscles, the six pack muscle that lives closest to the skin. And that's why so many people are just, working so hard to be able to get that six pack abdominal muscle. A little bit deeper than the six pack are two abdominal muscles that make a letter X called the obliques, internal and external. So you do a shoulder check when you're driving down the road, you throw a ball for your dog to catch. Those are your obliques. Deeper to that are your transverse abdominis. Now think about a corset. It wraps the entire body and it gives us shape. It protects our spine, and it is really important from a from a breathing perspective. All right.
Mm.
So that's the 360-degree cylinder. Your diaphragm is the main muscle of respiration. When you take a big breath in through your nose, your lungs fill with air. And this muscle that's like a dome, like a mushroom cap or an open umbrella, when you breathe in, that diaphragm has to duck out of the way to get out of the room, out of the way for the lungs to fill. But when we exhale, that diaphragm comes back to its mushroom shape. All right. That's the ceiling of the core. The pelvic floor is the floor of the core. And what a lot of women don't understand is the ceiling, which is that diaphragm, and the floor, which is the pelvic floor, have a direct relationship to each other, which
Mm.
means that when one is not working, neither is the other. All right. So I want to just spend 30 seconds on this and help you understand that we lose the ability to breathe as we become young adults. Okay. We wear tight jeans. We suck in our belly and try and become as narrow as we possibly can for the aesthetic of what that looks like.
Right.
And we stop using that mushroom cap to breathe. We start using these little beef jerky muscles in our neck. And what that does without us knowing is it shuts off the diaphragm, which over time, it's like muting, putting the pelvic floor on mute. So it just does nothing. And over time, you know what happens when you don't use a muscle? You start to lose the tone. It starts to
Right.
get tight. It starts to get dysfunctional. So that's the first secret I bet most of our mothers never shared with us, is that
No.
our breath is critical to our pelvic floor health.
I know people will be so surprised to hear that because you're like, it doesn't even seem like it's anywhere near the area, right? Okay, that's quite an eye opener. I'm pretty impressed to share that with everyone and the understanding that your breath affects your pelvic floor.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you want to go with it? Do you want to, so here, let me share this. So then the story continues, right? We don't breathe like we should. The pelvic floor starts to become dysfunctional. Maybe we become moms. So we believe that when we have babies, we should start having some incontinence, right? So we go for a run and we put a pad in our panties just to, absorb that
Just in
urine,
case.
just in case, right? And then we don't talk about it with any of our best girlfriends because we don't see that on people's Instagram feeds. So we think we're the only person going through it, right?
Yeah.
And so we hold that in. Maybe we Google what is incontinence? How do I stop incontinence? And then guess what happens? You start seeing ads for the latest product. So go into your grocery store in the aisle where there's like all the different pads when we have our period. And you'll also see a section of that part of the grocery store that has incontinence products. You might see a commercial on TV that shows a woman in a beautiful two-piece suit that is looking super confident because she's wearing her pad, which is actually just masking the symptom and not really getting to the root cause, because there's research that shows that in 90% of pelvic floor dysfunction, which includes pelvic floor pain, pain during intercourse, incontinence, that in 90% of cases, it is not a medical issue that is causing that dysfunction. It's actually a movement slash fitness issue that is causing the dysfunction. It's a group of muscles that has forgotten what their job is and just needs to be taught through
Wow.
breath, good movement, good posture. Jane, the basic things that you talk about with your community all the time.
Hmm.
We just have to connect the dots between the
Yeah.
two. And 9 out of 10 women can start to enjoy the confident, sensual, badass boss, life that they deserve.
I think you've just blown people's minds with that.
Mhm.
We don't, it's so normalized. Well, not that people are talking about it, but the fact that, especially with, AI now, if anyone is Googling at all, like, what do I do with leakage or whatever, they're going to start seeing those ads. And so then that does seem normalized. Oh, as you get older, this is normal. Like that's what the ads will say. So it becomes very normalized, and people think, okay, it's just what I got to expect. I had 3 kids or 4 kids or whatever it is, or I'm getting older. Not addressing the root cause, which you're saying is totally totally doable in what, 90% of the cases or so. It's fixable with attention to the muscle,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
amazing. So how, I know you're a Pilates expert. So is it Pilates, or how do people work with those muscles? Breathing exercises, I'm sure, are part of it, but what else can
Yeah.
they do?
So breathing is the start point. And you know what? Let's just touch a little bit on what does dysfunction look like? Okay.
Okay.
So there's, if you think of a spectrum, a number line, okay, on one end of the spectrum is a pelvic floor that's too tight. It's called hypertonic, right? Give your kids a bunch of sugar, they're going to get hyper, too much movement, too much activity, right? Our pelvic floor can get hypertone, too much tone, too tight. Okay. So then what do you think happens when you cough or sneeze or like laugh? That muscle is going to kind of spasm a bit and you might leak. Okay.
Mm.
On the other end of the spectrum is the opposite, which is called hypo, HYPO tone, a lack of tone. All right.
Right.
So women in this realm will have more of that urge incontinence where you didn't have to go to the bathroom a second ago and your hands are full of groceries and you get to the front door and it's like, I need to
Now.
pee like now. So you drop the groceries, you fiddle with your keys, you're taking your pants down as you're running to the bathroom. Okay. That's what tends to happen when there's hypotone. Now, there can be any really, you can stop anywhere on that number line. And for some women, they can experience symptoms of both hypertone and hypotone. What a lot of women don't understand is even things like chronic constipation can be linked to a hypertonic pelvic floor,
Wow.
tight hips, chronic low back pain, digestive issues, that whole area. When we understand that a muscle to be functional, any muscle, it needs to be surrounded by blood, which is oxygen rich and nutrient rich, so that the tissues of those muscles can live. It's like the food that the muscle eats. If you don't bring healthy blood flow to any muscle, over time, that muscle is going to suffocate and it's going to become less functional. And
Mhm.
eventually, it's going to die. Okay. We call it atrophy. So, what can you be doing to go back to your question from a movement perspective? I mean, my movement of choice is Pilates, although I love to cycle, I love to walk, I right. So it doesn't matter if you whatever you love, if you love yoga, if you love Tai Chi, if you love step class, if you whatever you are doing, if you understand the function of the breath in that exercise. So if I am lifting a heavy weight in a deadlift, let's say I'm in the gym lifting a heavy weight, if I'm holding my breath as I'm lifting, if I'm on my bike and I'm holding my breath or I'm gasping for air, what that erratic breathing tells my brain is that I'm possibly a little unsafe,
Mm.
possibly under some stress. So, what my nervous system is going to do is it's going to respond by sending out these alarm bells. Alert, alert, the sympathetic nervous system turns on, right? So, we get this burst of adrenaline, this burst of cortisol. Our appetite gets suppressed, our thirst mechanism gets suppressed because the body thinks it's kind of in danger. Because what happens when you're watching a scary movie? You pull up the covers and you might hold your breath when you know something,
Yeah.
something scary is about to happen. That's what we're doing through our regular movement. So whatever you're doing, the absence of breath or an erratic breathing pattern is going to make the body be like, is she okay? Do I have to protect her? And when it protects us, guess what it does? It holds. It
Yeah.
holds and it holds and it holds. So breath and movement
Mm.
is absolutely key when we are trying to feed our body the blood flow that it needs to be able to nourish those muscle fibers.
And I suppose too that if we're kind of going around in a constant state of stress, like many of us are in our culture, then the message to release that muscle never gets through. So then it just keeps getting held and held and held. So I can see how that might cause a problem. It's like any other muscles, right, in our body that get tight and stiff, from because we're in tension. We are in tension. So okay, are there different So you talked about using the breath. So breathing while you're moving is important. So is there a particular way that you suggest breathing when you're
So,
exercising?
yeah, actually, and I mean, breathing, any kind of breathing is better than the absence of breath. So that's the first thing, right? If you tend to be a breath holder, like I said, when you're lifting or the last minute of your run and you find that you're not breathing, any breath is better. But if you want to optimize your breath, anytime you are in a phase of exertion, all right, that's where the exhale phase of breath is the most impactful. All right. So when we are exerting, if you're like, again, lifting weights or bags of groceries, or, your baby in his or her bucket seat, anytime you're lifting and there's exertion, if you exhale out of your mouth, what that does is it creates those transverse abs. Remember, I told you the corset set of abs. That corset is going to just kind of hug you, and the pelvic floor is going to lift in response to that exhale. And
Mm.
that's where you're protecting the spine. Your posture is kind of more on guard, and you're going to go through that movement in a safer way. And Jane, I think another really important point that I want to bring up, right? It kind of fits right now, is so many women do Kegels. And I think Kegels are what many of us know, like you push your baby out, well, you better start doing Kegels, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that you still have a floor down there to hold everything up inside of us. But what I find with a lot of my clients is that I want to take them beyond the Kegel. A lot of us are taught that a Kegel is stop the flow of urine, start the flow of urine, stop the flow of urine, start the flow of urine. Yet from a biomechanic perspective and how muscles work, that is actually teaching that muscle to be like a light switch, which means it's either on or it's either off.
And we want it to be more fluid.
But what happens in between those two endpoints?
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a process, right? There's a process to create the outcome of on or off. And I think that's where the Kegel tends to fall short. So when you're inhaling through your nose, the pelvic floor on that first breath is at rest. Okay. When you exhale out of your mouth, it's like you're picking up a grape with your vagina, or, lifting an elevator. The next inhale is the elevator or the grape descending. And then you go through this exhale, lift, inhale, descend, exhale, lift,
Mm.
inhale, descend. And that's what takes you from stop the flow, start the flow, stop the flow, start the flow, to this beautiful, almost infinity sign, energetic way of, it's like giving CPR to your pelvic floor. We're bringing life back into that part of our body.
I love that infinity and tying it with the breath like that, because the breath is not, all of a sudden it's in, all of a sudden it's out. It is a process. And so you're tying that pelvic floor muscle into that process. So do you use visualization then with the breath? Do you find that helps?
I find for a lot of my clients, visualization helps, or those, like what I just said, the elevator lifting and lowering, or
Mhm.
picking up a grape, because you don't want to squash that grape, as silly as that sounds. That really, that helps women. And you know what? Um, it's important to understand that guys have a pelvic floor too, and a lot of erectile dysfunction. And I always like to just plant that little seed to the women in your community, and the guys that happen to be here too, is that first of all, a lot of men don't think they have a pelvic floor, because they think you need to be able to have a baby to need a pelvic floor, but you actually don't. That's not true. And um, in a guy's body, chronically tight hips, which a lot of guys just have chronically tight hips. They wear, I think of my dad. He used to have his wallet in his back pocket all the time, right? So you sit down, you get this asymmetry in your pelvis, which
Mm.
is the bones, around the body, the hip bones. And when our bony structure is impacted in an asymmetrical way, even for us women, slinging a purse over the same shoulder all the time, it's going to start to impact the bony
Yeah.
structure, which is going to start to impact, the muscle. And when the muscle gets impacted, we have this connective tissue called fascia. Fascia hugs every single muscle fiber in our body. And fascia is like the boa constrictor snake that keeps that oxygen rich, nutrient rich blood flow from reaching the muscles to give them the life that they need to be able to function for us in our activities of daily living. So it's this full, cycle of how are we sitting? How are we breathing? How much water are we drinking? And that's what I love about this topic is it really is, it's so simple once you break down the components of how to get to the root of this issue that has created a $21 billion industry of incontinence products. We believe wholeheartedly that that's the solution, when really it's just a band-aid to the symptom of incontinence. It's never gonna fix it.
Right. What hope you're giving so many women who are feel like it's their destiny to wear these for the rest of their lives, that there's something that they can do about it. So, all right, starting with the breath, and you
Yeah.
talked about using the breath and imagining the pelvic floor rising and falling with the breath.
Mhm.
What other, are there more like active type of, well, you also talked about exercise and how making sure when you're breathing, you're exhaling on the exertion, the two E's, what makes it easier to
Oh, I like
remember,
that.
right?
Yeah.
So exhaling on the exertion when you're doing certain exercises. I suppose when you're running, you're just breathing while you're running. We're not, you're always exerting.
Exactly.
So what, are there any other sort of active exercises that you would recommend to help with pelvic floor muscle toning?
I think that it's important to understand, kind of going back to what I just said, when you have less than optimal posture, when our bones aren't living where they're supposed to live,
Hmm.
the muscles are going to respond to that. All right. So there's been a big trend toward that, barefoot training and like 0 degree, minimalist footwear, and all that is really fantastic. But I want everyone to understand that even in a running shoe, there's a little bit of, an incline to the way the foot is positioned in that shoe. So we have 26 bones in each foot. There's a big bone at the back of each foot. It's our heel bone called the calcaneus. The other 25 bones in each foot are like small, little, funny shaped bones meant for movement. So small bones are always meant for movement. Big, heavy bones, like our arm bones, our long leg bones, they're meant for stability. So something as simple as posture can really play into our pelvic floor function. Now, when you're standing, you want to have about 80% or sorry, 60% of your weight in the heels. All right. About
Okay, a little
40,
bit
yeah,
more.
a little bit more, because that bone at the back is meant to hold that extra weight. The metatarsals are the part of our foot where the toes connect into the main structure of the foot. Just like we have knuckles in our, where our
Hmm.
fingers connect to our hand, we have, when our toes connect into the main part of our foot, we have our metatarsals. So across the widest part of the foot, not under the toe pads, is where we want to place the other 40%. The reality is that almost 90% of us carry 80% of our weight forward on our toes. What that does to our posture, you guys know in the Winter Olympics, the ski jumping event, right? We become these chronic ski jumpers where our nose is in front of our butt, our quads, our leg muscles are on all the time, our butt becomes weak and pancake like. Our hamstrings, which are the muscles at the back of the leg between the butt and the knees, they become weak and tight. Our calves have to work hard, and our low back starts to get this bowed, overly bowed shape to it. So we call it sway back. And the structure just becomes really inefficient. All right. And if you imagine, if our bones are way out there in that ski jumping position, the pelvic floor, which is meant to be like this beautifully symmetrical hammock, it starts to get, it's like if you were in a hammock, when you lie in the middle of a hammock, it just holds you really nicely.
Yeah.
But if you try and get out to one side, it kind of just wants to flip you
Yep.
over. It's like perpetually trying to lay on the edge of the hammock. The hammock's going to respond to the
Right.
weight being forward. It's the exact same thing. So now we have this pelvic floor bowl of muscles that is weighted forward. So it becomes unable to do its job, which, like I said earlier, is to hold those organs up in our body and give that area function so we can urinate, we can poop properly. So it's like one it's like a spider web. It just impacts so many parts of our life that
Really.
we don't realize how this central part of our body can really give our entire body health and wellness a boost if we just learned a little bit more about it.
Wow, you're really helping everyone today learn a bit more about Jana. So this is fabulous. Okay, so I know that you have designed this Cooch ball. So let's hear a little bit more about the Cooch
Talk about
ball.
it.
Like, why is it this size? What prompted you to make it, and so on?
All right. So I was inspired to create the Cooch Ball because of the tens of thousands of bodies that have come through my door, through my studio and my clinic over the past 15 years. And the majority of people believing that going to the grocery store to buy that pad was the only option, or not being able to feel sensual or having pain during
Mm.
intercourse was just how they had to live the rest of their life. Right. And I would do these workshops at my studio. They would sell out. Women wouldn't make eye contact with me. They would wait in line until after the workshop was done, in tears, telling me that I just spoke to their soul. And,
Oh.
I gave them hope. And when I started working with Dr. Crawford, who is the urogynecologist whose research this is based on, when I realized that the muscles need that oxygen rich, nutrient rich blood to live, literally to live. And without it, you might as well go and get those pads every month, right? I was like, okay, we know from, lots of personal training, kinesiology research that when fascia restricts blood to a muscle, that muscle fiber atrophies. We talked about that earlier. My next challenge was, what can I create that is doesn't have to be inserted, that can be used anywhere? You could throw it in your backpack, you could throw it in your suitcase, that would take minutes a day for women and men to use to improve the blood flow to this part of the body. Because if we don't create the environment for change and we just focus on breath, we can only move the needle so far when it comes to improving the pelvic floor. But if we can create the environment for change, if we can create that oxygen rich, nutrient rich blood flow, then we can create a new neural network through our breathing patterns, through our posture, through our hydration, that can help this area flourish. And that was my challenge. And so I'm the mom of three boys. And back then they were younger. So they had like little mini basketballs and little floor hockey balls. And it was I talk about it like the three bears. Some were too hard, some were too soft, some were too big, some were too small. And so I created this ball because what I found is, for a man's body and a woman's body, the 5-inch diameter really is optimal for the bones of the pelvis. And yes, men's and women's pelvis, the bones are a little bit of a different angle. But this size really was like the just right fit. The patent, because it's got a utility and a design patent. And what's so special about this that is totally different than going to a department store and buying a little ball, is that what you don't see is what's inside. There's a layer of this really cool nylon thread that we wrap in a very specific manner around the bladder of the ball.
Hmm.
Why that's important is because this isn't meant for kids. Yes, kids could play dodgeball with it or but that's not the function of it. Okay. The function is, when an adult sits on this ball, I need it to create the experience of the environment change. I need it to have the ability to create that oxygen rich blood flow through the melting of the fascia in the 3-minute experience. So that's what it does. You sit on the ball,
Hmm.
your pelvic floor basically is here, right? And you can sit on your chair, on the floor, on your bed, anywhere. You don't have to be on a mat with legs crossed if that's not available to you. But once you sit on the ball, the weight of your body on the ball creates this release of the fascia. So what you start feeling over time is this warm, tingly sensation, which is the biofeedback that you can be confident that there is that fresh blood getting to that area. Then we add the diaphragmatic breathing that we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
The pick up the grape on the exhale, put the grape down on the inhale. Pick up the grape on the exhale, put the grape down on the inhale.
Ah,
Now we're teaching the tone. So
right.
we're creating the environment, and then we're creating the function simultaneously through this very meditative 3-minute experience. And you know what, Jane, for some of my clients, they have so much dysfunction that they can only sit for 15 seconds, right? It's just, I call it the ouch factor. And if you sit on the ball and the ouch factor sends you through the roof, do you want to show your ball? I know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So mine's
it's
mine's not smooth like yours. It's bumpy because, well, it comes with this inflator, so you can
yeah,
inflate to a good level of softness or hardness for you.
exactly. So Jane's has a little bit less air. It's got some dimples in it, right? So if you need to take some air out, you can, or like I coach my clients, sit on your couch or sit on the mattress on your bed because it'll absorb some of the ball and it won't be so intense. We are so adverse to pain, okay? We need to actually become pain seekers. And in this case, if you get off the ball, the pain goes away. So if you get on the ball and there's a little bit of discomfort, as long as you can keep that beautiful flowing breath going, your brain is not going to think that you're in an unsafe position. As soon as you start to hold your breath, squeeze your bum, start breathing erratically, it's time to get off because you're
Right.
not doing your body any service at that point. And that's the simplicity of this. You get to, over time, be like, oh, I did 30 seconds today. I did a minute today, right? And you can start to build this practice into your life just like you brush your teeth. And that part of the body becomes optimized. And really, from there, I just say the sky is the limit because it gives us our confidence, it gives us our sensuality, it gives us our function back, which so many of us just believe is a part of aging. We have to lose that because we had another birthday or another candle on our birthday cake.
So
Not
the
true.
key is being able to do the breath while you're on it, not sit there and like hold your breath and like muscle through it kind of thing. You want to feel relaxed while you're sitting on it, even through the discomfort. Is that right?
Even through the discomfort. Yep, that ouch factor is going to be there, but
Yeah.
understand that that's a part of the process. And, Rome wasn't built in a day. For
Mhm.
some people, it takes them a month before they start feeling that tingly warmth, which is the blood flow. They don't feel anything for the first month. And they're like, this isn't working. And I'm like, you've been like this for decades, right? We can't just erase it in 30 days. So it truly becomes, you're not the, in the story of the tortoise and the hare, we are the tortoise. We are the slow and steady wins the race, and it's process, and then the outcome happens.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So that's great. I know that uh, you've got instructions on there where to put it to, which is great. Um, you can use this for other things too, though, right?
Yes, yes, yes. And I mean, we'll talk a little about a free bonus that we're going to add into the show notes. But the Cooch ball is not just a one trick pony. You can use the Cooch ball for lots of areas in your body. So, I use mine for neck tension or just even jaw tension. Sometimes these masseter muscles, the gum chewing muscles, get really tight. They can create headaches or brain fog. I use mine a lot for a muscle called the psoas, which connects our leg to our spine. It's the hip
Yeah.
flexor. So we're sitting in front of Zoom screens all day long, laying on your tummy, getting your Cooch ball in the psoas. I use it a lot for bloating, depending on, my cycle and the time of the month, just laying on it under my belly button. I've used it behind my calves for knee discomfort. I've even used it like on my face to get some, extra blood flow. The skin is so thin on the face that you can use it to give yourself a little bit of sparkle before you head on to a call or out for a night with friends.
I love it. I love it. So you want to talk about what you're going to share with the audience?
For sure. So, because you're a part of Jane's community, and I love what Jane does and how she shows up, we have a special offer. So, there will be a link, she'll put it in the show notes, but there's going to be a link where you can get your Cooch ball. And like she said, the Cooch ball comes with a pump. It comes with a little quick start. It's like a postcard from me with a little quick start guide on the back. And then you there's a little QR code, or you can go to the website and you can get your educational resources that come with it. I teach you how do you breathe properly? How do you fill it? If you fill it too full, how do you get some air out of it? That's all going to come with this. But the one really unique added bonus, it's exclusive. So don't go to my website to get it because you're not going to get it. You got to get it here with this link in the show notes. Is the bonus is a really fun, impactful course that I created called the Cooch Fix Pack Mini. So, like we just talked about, you can use the Cooch ball for a whole body wellness experience. And the Cooch Fix Pack Mini is 30-minute movement experiences with me that show you how to use the Cooch ball for upper body wellness, neck tension, jaw tension, headaches, all that kind of stuff, lower body wellness, sciatic pain, knee health, foot health. And then I actually take you through one of the sessions. It's all around gut health. So we use the Cooch ball to work through the ascending, the transverse, the descending colon. So those of you that are bloated or constipated, you're going to get that in that course as well. And I just want you to be inspired to know that, we didn't come with an instruction manual with this body, but when we start to learn what it needs, when it's just whispering versus when it's all out in a temper tantrum, that's a beautiful thing. We become connoisseurs of our own body, and that's pretty spectacular. That's how we age gracefully. That's how we optimize our lives. And, that's why people like Jane and I do what we do to help inspire, our communities to think just a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, there's really so much that we can do. But people aren't hearing about the pelvic floor so much. So I'm really happy that you're talking about that. I mean, I didn't even really know about that. It's like, Kegel exercises, okay. And I'm into breath work, so probably, that was helping. But having something like the Cooch ball, and especially, I mean, I thought it was only for sitting on, but now we've got all these other things that you're sharing. I can't wait. I got a little bit of jaw tightness, so I'm going to be using it for that. Thank you so much, Jana. That's a beautiful gift to give the audience. So I really appreciate you for that,
You're
and
welcome.
for all the work that you're doing. So we got one last question, and that is the one I ask every guest, and it's all about intentional living by design. It's wellness by design. So what's one thing that you would recommend someone could do today, like a baby step they could do today to initiate healing in their body?
Yeah. So, you might think that I'm going to go right back to the breath, but I think I've talked enough about breath and posture and movement. I am going to share, and I live in Mexico now. I used to live in Canada, so I understand that much of Canada right now is covered in snow. Yet I would like to share the grounding practice that I did when I was in Canada, that I do now in Mexico. I feel like connecting to Mama Earth on a daily basis and absorbing her frequency is really critical to being able to just, shift out of what can be those little mini tornadoes that make us feel like we are overwhelmed or we're stuck or we don't know what the next first step is. So all I do is, if you're in a place where you can get your feet on the ground today, feet on the ground, hands on a tree, and just some big breaths, breathing up from Mama Earth and then exhaling back down into her. If you are in snow-covered tundra, even if you can get outside, not in bare feet, have your boots on, get your hands on a tree, or if that's not possible, if you have a plant in your home, just, caress the leaves, just something that is a living being that you can absorb that nature. And if that is impossible, even just getting onto YouTube and watching a video about nature. There's studies that show that MRIs of the brain don't discern between actually being in a forest and watching a video or looking at a picture of a forest. So that would be my one inspirational tip that I would leave for
I
your audience.
love that. It's winter here. There's snow on the ground in Newfoundland, but I'm going to go out and hug a tree. I'll keep my boots on though, but I will hug a tree. That was beautiful, Jana. Where's the best place for people to connect with you?
So you can head over to coochball.com if you want more information about the Cooch Ball. Jana.Danielson on Instagram is where you can find me. DM me if you have any questions at all. So those are the best two places.
Oh, thanks, Jana. Thank you so much for being a guest on Wellness by Design today and really opening up our eyes about pelvic floor health and that it's so much in our control to do something about it. So thanks so much for that, Jana.
You're welcome, Jane.
Thank you to everyone listening or watching, and check out the link that we'll have in the show notes where you can get the Cooch Ball and this extra course. You can use it for all kinds of other things as well. All right, have a great day, everyone.